the next highest ranked in importance, in terms of importance, was technology capability. And this had a gap of about 30% between the importance placed by buyers and the assessment of the reality of delivery by the TMC. I guess one note here that's really important. I don't know whether the assessment is about technology the TMC owns or whether it's an assessment also of technology the TMC works with in a third-party capacity, and I think that's definitely worth considering before we kind of get into the dialogue.
For me, I think one of the key things from the pandemic was we realised the reliance on people versus digitalisation. And I think if we didn't have such a reliance on people in the TMC, we wouldn't have had the service crashes that we had, because if it was more digitalised, you wouldn't have needed so many headcount. And I think for me, the pandemic absolutely highlighted that fact. And the TMC needs to be on a very big digitalisation journey, because there's an awful lot that they rely on for people, and it shouldn't be that way.
Do you know, it's really hard to sell tech. It's really hard to help people understand what it does. I think we often buy really smart bits of tech and then we just don't use it particularly effectively. And I think I was reading a Gartner study that said we've got to think differently about how we sell tech. If you just sell technology through a digital channel, I think only about 22% of customers said they were happy. When you use a traditional rep opportunity, only about 65%. So we haven't really got that right generally in how we sell tech. It's complicated as an industry. It's relatively new for us. We're used to selling agents, being able to walk into an office, meet people with people. So I think there's some learnings there about how you blend selling digital well. It needs to be a combination of tech and people, and really think about that as a TMC. How can you help us understand how it's going to help us, how it's going to solve problems, all the stuff it can deliver? I think it's really challenging.
Travel management companies haven't embraced the whole digitalisation of travel as much as they could have, and are playing catch up. And I do feel there are organisations going in completely different channels, and that's not good or healthy for the industry as a whole. I think this catch-up is creating, to me, that gap, because I think lots of organisations are looking at digitising their programme, innovation, how can we change things, more self-serve.
There is definitely an acceleration on the need for TMCs to ingrain technology as an enabler of the end-to-end experience. It's not as polarising as it used to be, where you had online experience, offline experience. Those days are long gone. You know, technology is now an enabler for the travel platform, and I think it is right that that's the focus.
Why is it so easy for me? How it's far more digital capabilities in booking a holiday or whatever. I'm going to compare that, and so people have access to all of these .coms, etc. How can we get that information, get those capabilities within the corporate environment, and how can TMCs adopt that to create that sort of world of choice if an organisation wants that?
Are we talking about companies wanting to have more flexibility in terms of the content that's being driven into their corporate travel programme, or does it extend beyond that?
I think corporate buyers have always had this. It's nothing new. You know, this parity, that what you want to see. You want to make sure that travellers, your end consumers, are booking within a managed framework. Every time someone goes out of that framework, that creates significant problems, whether that's from a duty of care or other perspectives. And the challenge is bringing content, but not just content, also about servicing. There are different ways and means to service. There's different messaging that could be applied using third-party tools. I think there's a reluctance for some to use those tools that are widely available as well. So I think it's more than just but content is upfront.
I challenge that, actually. One thing that we've been talking to our travellers about, and they're happy to only see one particular airline, especially our high-frequent travellers. So I think there could be a big change around that. I think the talk track may change in the future as people start to speak to their end users much more. And it goes back to whether we're giving our opinion as travel managers versus what the actual end user and the traveller actually want. And I think that's going to be the interesting thing. Also, though, to your point about, what else do we want to be brought? I think the new technologies coming out like ChatGPT, if TMCs embrace that now at the start, they're going to be able to perhaps deliver more of that consumer experience because they're going to have technology that will help them do that. The question will be who's going to embrace that at the start and who's not. But I think that could be a differentiator for any TMC that looks at that now because it feels like it's endless, the opportunities with that.
Without doubt.
Karen, given your challenge there, would it be fair to say that the online booking tool came about because people were looking for digital solutions and they wanted to drive people through the same program, to the same managed program? What you've just said there is that somebody already knows they want to book a particular airline. Do you foresee then that we will start to loosen the binds of people booking through managed channels and managed technology and a specific user interface or booking tool?
I still think it can be controlled. It can just be booked in different ways.
Okay.
So whether it be a direct booking channel, but you can still overlay technology to bring that data in.
Okay.
And I think there's a myth out there that if you allow somebody to go direct to a particular airline's website, you lose your data, you're not going to get security tracking.
Yeah.
That's not actually accurate. There are ways that you can use technology to still bring that in. I still think a managed travel program is important. I still think cost is important. But we started this whole conversation around the traveller experience. And if you put traveller at front of mind, what's important to them, especially the high frequency ones, is who they're flying with. And so I think we have a duty to look at different ways to be able to deliver to what our consumers actually want to see as well. And honestly, some of this around travel, challenging our industry now on this is what's going to drive it forward. And each TMC has an opportunity to be part of it, or there'll be solutions found where they're not part of it. The latest thing is one airline is setting up their own help desk now, as an example. Well, the help desk should be the TMC. So how do we make sure that that is what happens going forward as well? Otherwise, the TMC could actually start losing volumes, or corporates could actually go out and say, well, look, we've got this piece of business that we want to still do with this particular airline. We're going to put that piece of business out to bid and then find the TMC that can actually service that. So for me, it's a perfect storm of fantastic opportunity and change that's coming.
I think there's a huge opportunity for this industry to change. And if it doesn't, I think you'll find corporations looking at different ways and means, which I think is a disappointment, because I think the TMC has a real opportunity to embrace this in a very, very different way.
Comparison shopping, based on the feedback that we tend to get on the whole, is incredibly important. If you don't have comparison shopping, the value that can leak is significant. So there is a sense amongst many of the TMCs that comparison shopping is something that we need to protect, and that in itself is what drives value. And if you lose comparison shopping, there is a significant risk that you're going to be driving a lot more cost into the corporations.
I've always thought that about comparison shopping, and that's always been my go-to explanation as to why travel management exists and all those things. But actually, listening to Karen's point about not the travel manager view versus the customer view, I wonder if as an industry anyone's got any data around when you provide the comparison, 9 times out of 10 they still take their preferred choice anyway. Because then that comparison bit is irrelevant, or is it only 2 times out of 10 and we actually can shift them?
Yeah, if we look at the levels of demand that there are, and the capacity that's out there, airlines are driving prices upwards. There is a very, very strong leisure marketplace. Times are good from an airline perspective. So we just have to be a bit careful about what we wish for.
I would reiterate, and we need to be very careful. I do believe content is king for many, and the comparison shopping is right. It doesn't have to be, however, in the current state. I think there are different ways and shapes and forms maybe as to how we can deliver that and deliver content.
You're not on leisure business, you're on company business, and you're spending company money, and therefore the company should have a ability to choose what products and services you buy when you're driving company business. So I hear Karen's view, and I respect it, and I respect the programme greatly, but there is a difference of opinion out there in the marketplace. It's not everybody is encouraging that. And also, and again, just thinking about the kind of the message that it sends where we just go with preferred carriers of the individual, you lose control.
Comparison shopping now and policy at large is no longer just about cost either. You know, it's also about, well, what's the more sustainable option? What's the option that gets me there on time? What's the option that plays into my well-being? So I think being able to put all of the content in one place that's more than just your preferred provider, and I agree, 9 times out of 10 people will lean towards their preference, but they have got other decision-making factors at play at the moment, and sustainability is a huge one for driving a change in behaviour for what people will do. I think increasingly the TMC community at large is embracing open architecture as a way forward. For absolutely, we have to bring in all of the content, of course we do. And we have to work really closely with the airline community to make sure that we're able to do that and we're able to service it on the other side. But you then have TMCs with different strengths, with different audiences that will package that up differently to meet the needs, not just of a client, but the personas within that client. We've now got a sustainability manager, we've got a finance team, we've got the travellers, we've got the travel manager, we've got the EA community. So it's not just about having an online booking platform anymore either. It has to serve more than that if we're really meeting the needs of our buyers.
I think that's the sense of what I'm picking up both in the survey and around this discussion here, is that there is so much more that technology could do in our sector. What NDC and content and new technology should be doing is allowing me to present all the benefits that somebody might get with a concierge key or a gold card to a passenger that isn't of that status, but they pay for it. And so you're bringing new content to somebody in a different way that then challenges the need for loyalty or challenges the very expectations that the traveller might have. So I think that's the really interesting gap that technology doesn't quite do at the moment.
But the narrative around NDC was way ahead of the capability. So narrative drives expectation up, and everybody's then chasing that narrative. We're starting to see the rubber hit the road. So we're starting to see pragmatic conversations between TMCs and airlines, and then some not so pragmatic and realistic conversations with airlines, but it's beginning to come together.
Do you think there's a problem with technology as a whole, though, not just in our industry, but you start talking about artificial intelligence and plug and play and omni-channel, and then everybody has this expectation this stuff is just going to work.
It's a cautionary tale of how complicated our legacy infrastructure is, and I think that's often just not factored into it. And I do have a huge level of sympathy for the TMCs, because there's been so much work, and with the supply chain, it's not all down to you, it's how that content's coming to you and the decisions that the airlines are making in that. So I think, I completely agree with you. I think we've created an expectation 10 years ago of what was going to be delivered and stumbled into it and realised quite how incredibly complicated it was going to be. And here we are today, only now just starting to see some of that come to fruition. And I think it is a cautionary tale. We need to just remember that there are lots of DOS-based systems still sitting behind the scenes that are driving our industry.
So on that basis then, let's just get into the what. What do you think we can do as an industry in order to close that gap between kind of the importance placed on tech and then the perception of reality of delivery?
There's an element of show, don't sell.
Right.
What do we actually have now? And I'm with Mark, you can't, progress rather than perfection. I'm a big fan of that. But, I think we definitely expected the Earth when NDC was discussed.
Yeah.
And then, year after year after year when it wasn't delivered. So I think there's an element of hopefully just slightly more realistic sense of what's coming when. And then we can set that, we're back to expectations again, aren't we? But back to setting the expectations with our customers.
For some TMCs, ChatGPT is an opportunity for sure, but it's only really an opportunity if you can scale it. TMCs that aren't that vocal about looking at the innovation early, we could be having very transparent conversations about that in a safe environment, to your point, where we're able to talk about it without selling it.
So we can help you incubate.
We're thinking this. It doesn't mean they're not doing it. It just means that they're doing it in a different way. But I don't know necessarily, this is for the TMCs to think about, even if you're not being that vocal about your early innovative thoughts, it doesn't mean that you couldn't not share that with your customers early, albeit in a safe environment.
Once you start having those incubator conversations to understand, well, what actually would that look like? If you had it in your environment or my environment, what's some of the complexity? What else would we have to stitch into that?
Yeah.
I think you start to temper and get more realistic expectations.
We're looking at a very archaic ecosystem, right, that we have in this, but it can't be changed overnight because of the complexity that sometimes, I also have to say, as buyers, we create and overlay that complexity. Sometimes when we have to look at technology, we have to take a step back and say, is this really fit for purpose? Is this really what we want as an organisation? How can we simplify? So as we go down this road of simplification, maybe that's a way that we can start to look at technology and bring technology on board far quicker than just accepting what there is as, well, that's the way we've always done it.
I would say there's an opportunity, though, for the TMC and some of its clients to work more closely together on technology capabilities, because every company will have a technology department, an IT department, and it's like, how do you leverage that to make it work together? And I think that actually will strengthen relationships between the TMC and the clients. But I see huge opportunity there as well, because there's many companies out there that use different alternative technologies in many, many different ways that could support a TMC service offering, as an example. And I think it changes the conversation, but I think it's one that should happen, because I think that will just help all of this as well.
100%. The world's largest technology companies use a TMC.
It's a great quote.
And is anyone ever happy in tech?
It's also another great quote.
So the only thing I would add is from the why it happens, I think what we see across, and I think, Nikki, you said it earlier about, but you had much better words than I'm about to use, about almost like a PTSD of previous relationships or previous things that have happened to you. You sort of bring that to the table with you. Not you personally, but people do. And as clients come into a sourcing exercise, they don't trust what's put in front of them because they've been overpromised for the last 5 years in their current contract, for instance. So the show, not sell. So we have this theory around tech roadmap confidence is at an all-time low in the buyer community. And I would suggest that's part of where this gap comes from a tech expectation piece. And part of that will have been because of what the TMCs have been through and the investments they'll have had to have pulled back during COVID. But I don't think it was just a COVID thing. I think pre-COVID, any buyer would have been pitched a TMC tech roadmap with a whole series of this will be by this point, you get to the end of the year and 10% of it's been implemented. Maybe the TMCs have got much smarter at how they share roadmaps and just actually implement technology. So I think we've maybe got a little bit of a historical hangover in the buyer community around tech roadmaps. So I guess my advisory there would be for the TMCs to think very carefully about when they position tech roadmaps and the expectation that sits on those, and for the buyers to try to come to that table with a clean sheet of paper to think forwards.